Welcome. This is Mongo Slade. How you guys doing? And this is a surprise stream. I'm doing this at midnight. Why am I doing a stream at midnight? Well, my brain got to working and I couldn't go to sleep. There was a video that was posted on a channel called The Initiative. The channel was talking, basically, the channel exists to basically troll Eric July. And I was just happened to be laying in bed and looking for something to play. And so I played this video because the title was intriguing. It says libertarians and objectivists cannot be superheroes. And I was like, I know where we're going with this, but I want to hear it anyway. So what followed is a 44-minute mockery of libertarianism and objectivism, specifically objectivism. These are not the same things, by the way. And I thought to myself, typically what's going on with objectivism is that people don't really understand what it is. And they haven't read Ayn Rand. They find clips that are usually her talking to other people, and they haven't really engaged with what she is saying. Now, libertarianism is a little bit different from objectivism. Objectivism is a little bit more strict. But what they did a review video of Strange Brain Parts, who did a video on Steve Ditko's Mr. A. And this 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 comic book was written by Steve Ditko, the creator, co-creator of Spider-Man. And because this guy was an objectivist, he was mocked and ridiculed. He made a couple of objectivist superheroes. He was mocked and ridiculed and made fun of, and people still make fun of him. So I decided to listen to this video, and I decided to have a response to this video. So the video is 44 minutes. We're not going to go through every episode. Every minute of that would be goofy. I'll instead give you some of the summary, and then I'll respond. So the first thing that they really don't do is they don't really explain what libertarianism is. They don't really understand what objectivism is. So I'm going to give you those things first. Now, libertarianism is kind of hard to define because there's so many different flavors of it. Most people who are a libertarian are small government, private property, primacy of individual rights and liberties, etc. Objectivism is a little bit more strict than that. It's about rational self-interest. It's about reason is the primacy and purpose. I think they said she wrote that reason, purpose, and the last one was productivity. I think no purpose. Productivity is the purpose. I just read this and I lost. Oh, there it is. Reason, purpose, and self-esteem. That was the last one. Those were the objectivist ethics. And the idea being is that these ideas are about individuals putting themselves first, and that these things are horrible. It's horrible to put yourself first. You should always put other people first. This is what Ayn Rand calls altruism. And she doesn't like altruism, nor does she like collectivism. A little background on Ayn Rand. I believe she comes from Soviet Russia. She escaped the communist state and came over to the United States and founded Objectivism. It's a political philosophy based off reason. The main hole with objectivism is that runs contrary to human experience. It devalues things like emotions, which cannot be devalued because human beings are very, very emotional. So objectivism is not 100% correct. That being said, it's a lot more correct than people typically give it credit for. So in their stream, I guess, they decided to mock objectivism, which of course is one of the many caricatures and parodies of what objectivism is, because they don't really define it. They don't tell you what it is. They just kind of mock Ayn Rand. Throughout the entire thing, they called her crazy. She was a weirdo, etc. She's a hypocrite, all this kind of stuff. And I just decided we're going to talk about it. So one of the things that they were talking about was the woke Canadian YouTuber Strange Brain Parts, who was taking apart Mr. A. Mr. A was a comic book series that was created by Steve Ditko after he left Spider-Man. It was based off objectivism. Mr. A was humorless, colorless, very looking at things very black and white. The idea being that characters like Mr. A or the original version of The Question or Rorschach from The Watchmen, who see the world in black and white, are typically evil people or they're bad guys. You have to allow for shades of gray uh, in their way of doing things. Well, one of the rejections of this, as they said, is that you have to enforce your morality onto others. You do not. In objectivism, you're not really concerned about other people. You're concerned primarily with yourself. The idea that you're going to force other people to do anything runs contrary to anything I've read about Ayn Rand. She is not about forcing other people to do anything. That's typically how leftists think. It's about having control or power over others. Objectivism and libertarianism is all about maximizing control and power over yourself and your own life, for the most part. So the idea that Mr. A or whatever, it would be a superhero that would be enforcing their own personal morality. It's like, no, because then they can see not just a few seconds later that you can't allow people to murder or rape or do whatever they want, because even though that is sort of enforcing your morality, is saying that you can't rape this person, you can't murder this person. But then they say, well, yeah, you can't let people do that. Okay, well, what other morals are we talking about here? I don't know. Second was Ayn Rand is anti-religion, which I do believe is a fact. I've read enough Ayn Rand. I don't believe she's not a collectivist, and religion tends to be pretty collectivist. She's not for that. So that part is true. Then they start talking about singular uniformity and constant conflict with others, and that objectivism diminishes empathy, compassion, collective good, etc. Well, Ayn Rand would reject the concept of a collective good because she's against collectivism. But you don't understand empathy or compassion if you think that empathy or compassion are solely the realm of leftists. It is not. There's nothing preventing you from being a libertarian or an objectivist that has empathy or compassion for others. Simply put, you just don't understand what the philosophy is if you think that it prevents you from having empathy or compassion. Saying that objectivism is irrational is they say that they don't understand it, and it's against people's lived experiences. Well, it's not against people's lived experiences. Again, their primacy in this situation is stuff like gay people and trans issues. And, are objectivists going to force trans people to not be trans anymore? It's like, again, objectivism is not concerned with the trans issue. It's concerned with reality and with the individuals in themselves. The fact that a trans person is a trans person, well, that's fine. But a trans person cannot be what they claim to be, because that would be incorrect. And that would be that person trying to imprint their morality and their beliefs onto other people. We know what women are. The idea of what is a woman became a question only recently because other people are trying to change the definition of what a woman is. We know what women are. This conversation about what women are is dumb, and it's not something that other people are willing to engage in. It is something that group is trying to enforce on others. It has nothing to do with objectivists or libertarians. The rejection of that is because objectivists and libertarians typically deal with reality. That's why they play with the entire concept of A is A. A dog is a dog, a cat is a cat, a horse is a horse. It is what it is. It cannot be anything other than what it is. So a man born male can only be a man, period. Sorry if that breaks your heart, but that's how you operate in the real world. You can't decide that, well, I identify as a fish, and therefore you're going to go underwater and stay there. You'll die. And there's no reality that's going to change. Just like there's no reality in which people who produce small gametes what we call the sperm can all of a sudden also produce eggs. It doesn't happen. And because it doesn't happen, it's not real. Okay. So, but I'm not too interested in the trans issue and all that kind of stuff. I really don't care about that. That issue is not one that I feel is even necessary to engage in too much. They also talked about the medical consensus around trans issues. Again, I don't like talking about those things, but medical consensus is created by firing people who disagree. So the idea that there's a medical consensus, like who cares? Um, and also your consensus, you can shove it up your ass because the mob can be wrong. And once you understand that the mob can be wrong, you don't have any value in what the mob thinks. They said that objectivists and libertarians have low emotional intelligence, which I don't even know what that means. And they said that this is typical of people who are focused on philosophy, which would be, of course, themselves also. Um, the idea being is that libertarians are cold-hearted or objectivists are cold-hearted, which is incorrect. People just have different ways of handling the same situation. The impoverished, the lame, otherwise known as like people who are mentally handicapped and mentally ill or whatever. These people exist. Um, some people choose to handle that through large government programs in which you sap money from working taxpayers to give to these people. Other folks say, charitable giving through private churches or private NGOs or whatever is the best option. You're not a person of low emotional intelligence if you say, hey, maybe we should stop these extremely large programs and actually do a little bit more targeted and have programs that are specifically for this kind of thing. How is that in any way cold-hearted to say that the government shouldn't do it? Which is typical. If you ask a libertarian, they'll say, nope, we don't want the government doing it. The government is a large bureaucracy. It costs more for the government to do it than if you were just to fund it yourself. Which is a fact. For a long period of time, churches dealt with the education of children. They dealt with feeding and clothing the homeless. They dealt with a lot of that stuff without the government getting involved. Once it became a government job, it became a thing. It became a permanent bureaucracy where we dealt with these institutions forevermore. Now there's unions in these government bureaucracies that cost way more money than they normally would, because these people occupy a space. And then also you'll never actually solve the problem because now it's an industry. This is what they call the homelessness industry in places like Oakland, California, or San Francisco, where instead of actually trying to fight the problem, what they try to do is they try to deal with the symptoms. Oh, we have to have a shelter where we, put the homeless people in the shelter for the night, instead of trying to deal with the actual issues of the homelessness. Why is this homeless person homeless, and preventing them from becoming homeless or getting them off the street? It becomes, where can we put them for the night? Where can we put them for the night? Where can we get some new shoes from, and that kind of thing? And you're just dealing with the surface level. You never actually fix the problem. And because you never actually fix the problem, you're actually multiplying the problem because more and more people are becoming homeless for whatever reason, and you're not dealing with it. The same thing with the drug issue. People start doing drugs, and you just start giving them free needles, saying, oh, yes, it's better for us to give them needles through taxpayer money, of course. And we're just going to deal with the symptom of, we don't want them to die from withdrawals or whatever, rather than plucking them out of the society and telling them, you got to get clean. We don't want people doing drugs around here. It is not a low emotional intelligence position to say we can deal with these situations better, or we think that this situation is better. It's that you're too cocky about whether the government can fix the problem. They were completely not familiar with Mr. A as a concept. Most of them had never heard of it. The first they ever heard of it was probably that video, which made me laugh. That was humorous. So they played a video of Ayn Rand in which Ayn Rand talked about caring about people close to you, and they laughed about this and thought she was being a hypocrite, when they obviously had never read Ayn Rand, so which makes it even more silly to me. and they said basically why, what benefit is this a benefit to others? Basically, does her going on television, how does that benefit other people? And what she's trying to do is it's partly selfish. She's trying to sell more books. She's out trying to, commercialize herself. She's long dead, of course, but when she was alive, she was doing interviews for this purpose, to spread her philosophy, to give herself a platform so she could talk to more people. And she saw this as a way to benefit others, to benefit herself, benefit others. Of course, they talked about her being on Social Security, and they laughed at her for being a hypocrite when, of course, she was robbed through taxpayers, forced to pay into the Social Security system. How can you take somebody's money from them and then say that they're not allowed to get any of it back? That's crazy. That's just crazy. People who are against Social Security don't want to pay into it. That's the thing. It's not that people don't want their money back. We don't want to pay into it in the first place. That's the condition. That's the argument here. If you're going to force me to pay into it, of course I want my money back. It's the same thing with unemployment. It's the same thing with pretty much anything. If you're going to force me to pay for it, I'm going to use it. But the idea that you have the ability, or should have the ability, to force me to do it is what we're against here. Okay. She starts talking about contributing to each other's happiness, and which is about the free trade argument. We'll talk about that in a minute. They mocked her, of course, calling her fucking crazy and she's weird, and people are building a religion around her. And the idolatry around Ayn Rand is a fact. There's people who are built I remember, debating people in college and debating people online who do treat objectivism like it's basically its own religion. And I disagree with that. I don't think anybody is above being criticized. I do think there's some legitimate criticisms to be had of Ayn Rand, but I think you should actually read the shit first before you start criticizing it, or at least have a general understanding of what the thing is about. So when they finally got to the argument of whether libertarians and objectivists can be heroes, they say no, because libertarians are bad people. That's pretty much what it boiled down to. Libertarians and our objectivists are bad people. Libertarians are for trans and gay rights, but they won't talk about it. At least the public libertarians won't. That's their belief. They said libertarians tend to be more conservative, which imply, and then they applied that there was Koch brothers money is political stuff, funding a lot of the libertarian, like because the Koch brothers are libertarians and all this shit, all this old canard that you get from the left. Nobody cares about that crap. Most libertarians are dead fucking broke. If you ever seen the Libertarian Party, do you think that Libertarian Party is funded by billionaires? They're not. Trust me. The Libertarian Party is also quite split on the issues of homosexuality and trans issues and stuff like that. There's plenty of pro-trans, what we call left-wing libertarians. I don't know about objectivists. I'm not entirely sure, but the idea that the government shouldn't have the ability to tell you who to marry, I think most libertarians are in agreement with that. If you want to marry a man in a dress, I don't have any, that's not in my business. I don't care. And most libertarians will say the same thing. They don't care. But the idea that a woman is a woman, well, in order to operate in reality, that's just kind of what we have to accept. And of course, they believe that libertarians and conservatives, etc., have perverted what the LGBT rights mean, which, again, it's not something I care about, but it's something they care a lot about. I don't understand why people feel the need to riot so hard for it. I mean, it's like, come on, whatever. All right. So I thought this was a kind of silly. Okay, I thought it was kind of silly. They quoted Ayn Rand a little bit. They quoted her from Atlas Shrugged, which is not my favorite thing to do. I never read Atlas Shrugged, by the way. It's like 1,000 pages. It will never hold my attention. But I have read her book, The Virtue of Selfishness, and I have it on my shelf. So when I watched this video, I just went through and said, is it possible for libertarians and objectivists to be superheroes? Well, the answer obviously is yes. Your conception of what a libertarian or a superhero is, maybe not, because you don't know what a libertarian or an objectivist is. The idea being is that libertarians only do things for money. So they started doing a skit in there where they have a libertarian Spider-Man or whatever, or that or these kinds of things. And it's like, well, that's untrue because there's nothing in libertarianism or objectivism that prevents you from volunteering. You can do whatever you want. That's the thing about being an individual rights person. As individual people will make individual decisions and they can do whatever they want as long as they don't hurt anybody else. So that's usually something that libertarians and objectivists agree on. Uh, don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. That's kind of where we lay it. So it's pretty simple. You're not allowed to initiate force against other people, and don't take people's stuff, which is initiating force against them. And otherwise, whatever you want to do it. You want to be a man in a dress, do it. Most people will not care. Conservatives do care, especially the religious types. They tend to care. Most libertarians will just, they'll turn a blind eye to it and move on and, do their thing. But because so many people don't understand a lot about objectivism, I decided to talk about objectivism a little bit. So I only read 2 chapters of this book in preparation for this video. I've read the entire book, but I needed to refresh myself for this talk that we're having here. So I want to explain Ayn Rand's objectivism a little bit. So Ayn Rand, on page 17 of The Virtue of Selfishness, the topic is called Objectivist Ethics. Objectivist Ethics. She says, quote, life can be kept in existence only by the constant process of life-sustaining action. The goal of action is life. What furthers a thing's life is good. What threatens it is evil. So that's pretty common sense. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. She says, reason is the faculty, this is page 22, reason is the faculty that identifies and integrates the material provided by man's senses. In other words, you take in information, you compute that in your brain, and then you act upon it. Okay? She continues by saying that the process of thought is not automatic or instinctive or involuntary nor infallible. Man has to initiate it to sustain it and to bear responsibility for its results, meaning that you are responsible for your own behavior. You're responsible for how you computed and thought about this subject and before you acted upon it. On page 23, she says, everything he needs or desires has to be earned, has to be learned, discovered, and produced by him, by choice, by his own effort, by his own mind. In other words, you cannot trust that other people are going to do things for you. You have to make the decision to do things for yourself, which I don't understand why people will be against that. If you want to be a lumberjack, you gotta go learn you have to actively go learn how to be a lumberjack, right? If you want to be a brick mason, you think somebody's just gonna walk up to you, hey, here's all the knowledge and everything of brick masonry. No, you have to go pursue that goal. You have to go pursue whatever it is that you want to do. You have to be able to put forth the effort of going to pursue that. Every man has to do that. This is why, and woman too, of course, this is why typically you'll find libertarians and objectivists will be against like the welfare state, because they'd be like, well, you sit here, we'll provide for you, which is a slap in the face to people who have that get up and go, people who are self-starters, people who want to actively improve their own lives. So in that dichotomy, she starts calling people mental parasites, which I thought was pretty funny. But she started saying that mental parasites are essentially people who imitate the motions learned by others, meaning that your survival is only possible because of the others who paved the way. And then she says that mental parasites fall into the abyss following others who assume the responsibility that they evaded. In other words, when you see people who are just copying other folks, they're often going to fall into the same traps because their success has just become following other people. Eventually, you have to think about these things for yourself. You have to make your own decisions. You see this a lot in the scam culture, with these with like crypto and all this kind of stuff, right? Like guys figured out a way to pump and dump crypto, and people just started doing it, and then all these other crazy coins just popped up, and people were just pumping and dumping, and then some of these guys went to jail, and now some of these other guys are going to jail, or they bled the market out, they killed the market, like not EFTs, was it EFTs, uh, uh, if something, the digital things, but because they didn't initiate it, they didn't find any way to innovate it. It was just a follow the leader kind of scam situation. All of these people end up falling into the same hole. Even if you want to think about it in terms of like DJ Envy, him hanging around with that other guy, he was just being a follower, and the other guy is the one who was really involved with a lot of the real estate scams, and DJ Envy was just, oh, I'm going to follow him around, and look where he ended up. So we talked about it, objectivist ethics before, where there was the three values with reason, which is equal to rationality, which is equal to the precognition of your work, and it's the source of all of your knowledge. So as we talked about before, reason comes from your senses. You got, five senses: touch, taste, seeing, smelling, and there's another one, sight, which I'm not very good with, right? But I said sight. I said seeing. Anyway, you take in information, you compute it in your brain, and you decide what you're going to do before you do it. The purpose is your productivity, it's your life-sustaining actions, it is your constant chosen pursuit. In other words, if you have decided to be a brick mason, you've taken in that, you watched people do brick masonry, you thought about it, you said, I can do this, the price is right, I can do it. Then you get in there and you start actually doing the work of brick masonry, and it sustains you. You get a paycheck, you show up to work every day, you get a paycheck, you show up, you get a paycheck, etc. So the last piece would be self-esteem, which is pride or moral ambitiousness, the rejecting the role of a sacrificial animal, and rejecting, avoiding unearned guilt. In other words, when you become successful, that's when people start throwing unearned guilt on you. As you can see, people say eat the billionaires and all this kind of stuff. And some people, like you see Mark Cuban on Twitter right now, trying his very best to escape his own billionaire status. You see this a lot with rich people today. They have what they used to call Catholic guilt, but now it's basically better off called woke leftist guilt, where they feel guilty about things that did not happen. People that they did not hurt, and all of a sudden they feel bad about it. What Ayn Rand is saying is that if you did everything, you intentionally used your senses, you were productive, you created something, you worked at it, you became successful, you should feel pride in your work. Now, I know pride is a sin for those of you who are more biblically oriented, but I don't think she's thinking about it in those terms, because again, she's anti-religious. We're looking at it in the terms of you should be proud of what you've done, that you have provided value to somebody and they gave you money for it. You should be happy. Now that other people are saying you have too much, or whatever the case may be, why is that your problem? It's up to you to do the best you can. And what we have is, throughout history, we've had a lot of this unearned guilt pop up. Andrew Carnegie, of Carnegie Steel, he had a lot of that unearned guilt, which is why he wanted to do things like the gospel of wealth, when he would turn around and say, you give your money to me. He was against the government. He would say, give your money to me, I will build libraries, I will build hospitals, I will do these things because I'm good at that. I'm good at building stuff and staffing things and all that. And people decided to do it. This is why we have Rockefeller Center and Henry Ford, everything around here, especially in Detroit. So this kind of stuff, it comes from unearned guilt. It comes from these guys who decide they're going to be philanthropists, because to have so much and to be so successful, they start thinking, okay, now I have to take the entire world under my wing, when you really don't have to. Um, Ayn Rand says that one of the sources of all evils is an unfocused mind. Uh, I don't know about that. I can understand what she's saying because it's kind of like in the Bible, an idle mind is the devil's playground, but I don't know about that. She says man's happiness is the highest moral purpose. Now, this is something that becomes what people believe when they think about Ayn Rand. They think she's some kind of hedonist or, do what thou wilt. And that's not true. She rejects hedonism. And because she says that a lot of the temporary moral pleasures, like if you would, and I just ran this through my head, if you were going to a married guy, and you got a family and you love your family, and you're like, oh, well, it would make me happy in this moment to have sex with that stripper. Well, that's irrational because if you're happy with your family, you would put your thoughts towards your family. The long-term gain would be to increase your happiness over time rather than to seek 1 second of happiness or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or even an hour of happiness and sacrifice your long-term happiness with your family. Lose your children, lose your relationship because you chose to bang a stripper. It would be an irrational thing to do. So she's not supporting, the gluttony of do what thou wilt. She doesn't support that. She's talking about human good does not require human sacrifice and cannot be achieved by sacrificing anyone to anyone. Now, later in the book, she defines sacrifice a little bit differently than most people would. She saw sacrifice as the surrendering of larger values or greater values to lesser values. So things like your honor, your integrity, your personhood, all this sort of things being sacrificed for somebody else, or you're sacrificing all of your hard work to benefit somebody else. That's kind of what she's looking at from that perspective. Page 34, she says trade is the only rational principle of all human relationships. It's the principle of justice. It is based off of free, voluntary, uncoerced exchange, and that love, friendship, etc., are emotional responses, and that you should only seek to be loved for your virtues, not for your flaws. And I actually kind of agree with that last one. Too many people do want to be loved for their flaws and not as much for their virtues, not so much as the good things that they do. And you should be definitely look at people for the good things that they do and try to love them despite their flaws, I guess you could say. I disagree with the idea that trade is the only rational principle, but I understand it from her perspective that, trade is something that you intentionally do. You intentionally sit down and think about how to best move forward. You need your grass cut. This trade situation is perfectly based off justice. Are you going to pay this person what they want to do it, or aren't you? Or are you going to do it yourself? And that's fair, But some people don't make decisions based off that. So a lot of people make a lot of decisions based off their emotions, and you learn that much later, and that ends up being really disastrous. So that gives you sort of an overview of the objectivist ethics. Now, in reality, the most pertinent part of this situation, of this video, is the ethics of emergencies. This is what Ayn Rand wrote about helping other people. This is what superheroes are all about, man. They're all about helping others, right? So Ayn Rand says basically your own happiness is the highest moral virtue. You should not sacrifice yourself for anybody else. And people say, well, superheroes sacrifice themselves for others literally all the time. Ergo, objectivists and to a lesser degree, libertarians cannot be superheroes. Ayn Rand is going to prove you incorrect. Incorrect. If you actually read what she wrote, you would know it. Now, it's not, a complete obliteration of their argument like you would hope, but she makes a really good argument here. So page 49, she says, by elevating the issue of helping others into the central and primary issue of ethics, altruism destroyed the concept of any authentic benevolence. with goodwill among them. She says, assuming men have no personal interest in others, to value others means to sacrifice yourself, or love, respect, admiration of others is not and cannot be a source of its own enjoyment. So she's saying you can help other people because you could have a personal interest in those people. You can help other people because you value them, and you can do so, you can help them without sacrificing yourself. And that sometimes loving a person, respecting a person, or admiring a person is a source of joy for you. So, yes, you can help people if you want. And that's common sense, right? So then she says later on, a concern for others, especially for the ones that you love, is a rational part of one's self-interest. This is page 51, and she says, helping others or helping ones that you love is actually integrity. And she says basically this applies to both family and friends. But superheroes often save strangers. And this is where things get a little bit rocky because Ayn Rand does not see any reason for you to go out on a limb for strangers. She says on page 53, what should one properly grant to strangers? She says generalized respect and goodwill, the idea of innocent until proven guilty, and to judge them based off their according to their moral character. And then she says she gives you the one exception in which you can help strangers, or which you should help strangers as an objectivist, and that is in an emergency. She says an emergency is an unchosen, unexpected event that happens over a limited amount of time. And she gives some examples like floods and fires, etc. And she says it makes these emergencies create conditions where human survival is impossible. In an emergency, man's primary goal is to combat the disaster and restore normal conditions. Only in emergencies should one volunteer to help strangers if it is in one's power. It says, though it is not uh, in your best interest if it's of course putting your own life at risk. So if you're a superhero and you're dealing with a situation in which it's a disaster, it's a flood, the building's on fire, then it makes perfect sense for you to be a superhero. Maybe you don't jump in a situation where it's like an armed robbery. Maybe you don't sell the kitty cat from the tree. So you would definitely have to be a little bit of a different kind of superhero if you were going to be an objectivist superhero. But you would definitely jump into the burning building. You would definitely help people in the flood. You would definitely help people during the shipwreck. You would definitely help people during the school shooting, or some of the other crazy things that superheroes get involved with. And of course, she, like other libertarians, don't believe in the initiation of force. So as long as people are not initiating force, you are not obligated to use force. But the moment somebody else does use force, well, then you can. And she says basically normal conditions have to be restored, and then normal conditions can continue. Basically, you can continue trying to sustain your own life. She then also says that poverty, ignorance, and illness are not these kinds of metaphysical emergencies. Basically, she doesn't believe that you should jump in and help people just because they're sick, or just because they're poor, or just because they're ignorant. So she would be against like public education, or public universal health care, those sorts of things, housing programs, etc. Right? Um, because these people should be able to pull themselves out of it. This is also where I disagree with Ayn Rand, because there are situations where these people cannot take care of themselves. There are people out there who purely cannot take care of themselves. And part of dealing with philosophy is understanding that there are people who have sub 75 IQs. They may have all 10 fingers and all 10 toes, but they're not all there mentally. They may have some uncurable illness that prevents them from working. They may be paralyzed. They may have some version of paralysis, maybe from legs down, from neck down, or whatever. And that prevents them from pursuing their own goals. we do have to deal with those people. We do have to understand that. And I think sometimes it can be in your best interest to help those folks. Again, she leaves it open for you to say, you as an individual have to create your own values. You have to choose to value something, then you have to choose to pursue that which you value. And she's saying, well, these people are strangers. I probably wouldn't do it, but maybe you would like to. Maybe you would like to uh, value strangers enough where you'll put your life on the line. So if you look at the superheroes, for instance, most of the stories that I can think of involve, rational self-interest. Batman is going to, imagine you're Batman, right? You're in Gotham. You're Objectivist Batman. Maybe you don't get involved with some really petty things. There's some really petty things where you're kind of like, it's not really my problem. But if the Joker is gassing the TV station, which, he does quite a bit, he kills large numbers of people with his laughing gas. Well, there's no guarantee that the laughing gas is going to stay contained to the TV station. You might want to go and stop that. There's also no idea that you might actually be attached to that TV station. You might love their news. You might, have a friend in the audience. You might just see that what he's doing is wrong and it's in your power to do so because he's initiating force against others. You have the ability to do so. You have the ability to stop the Penguin. You don't have no ability to stop the Penguin from like selling guns. If the Penguin wants to sell guns, he can sell guns. But if he's, shooting at people, you have the right to stop him. Deathstroke, he wants to assassinate folks, you can stop that. There's a lot of things that you could do as Objectivist Batman that would not be a Mr. A kind of situation where he's humorless and lacking in personality and, punishing people for making mistakes. And that was one of the things that they discussed in the video, is that a character like Mr. A would punish people who got roped into crazy villainous plots where if we think about it, that's what our society does. Like in Michigan, literally just earlier this week, this is the week of February the 10th. Earlier this week, a woman was arrested because her son shot up a school. Like you would think that people will be responsible for their own actions, but also you're also responsible for other people's actions. That can happen, if you were involved. There's been plenty of times where, baby mamas or whatever has been arrested because they actually aided their criminal boyfriends in selling dope or, trying to hide the gun or flushing the drugs or whatever. These kinds of things happen. And their idea is that if you put yourself in that situation, you should be given some sort of grace. And I think that, and to a degree, yes, but Mr. A didn't see it that way. He sees it as the world is black and white. And if you collaborate with evil, you are evil. Which a lot of people, they have that sort of mentality when you talk about like Nazi Germany, right? So Nazi Germany, if you collaborated in any way, even if you were forced, because a lot of people who were like prison guards in Nazi Germany, they were doing so at the end of a gun. Either you are going to be the guard or you're going to be one of the prisoners. But those people are still hunted down and thrown in prison, even though they were probably coerced into being prison guards. And nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody cares. When you look at the situation in I think it was Minneapolis, the George Floyd situation, it wasn't just the police officer who had his knee on his back that got arrested. All of the cops that were around got arrested. So the idea that Mr. A was doing something that was some kind of uniquely objectivist, moral tyranny or whatever. No, we do that right now in the real world. We make people pay for bad acts that other people did that they either A, didn't stop, B, did not have the guts to stop themselves or to run away from, and we just continue to punish them. We do exactly that right now. So you can't blame that on the feet of Ayn Rand. Okay, so many people don't know what objectivism is. They don't know what libertarianism is. But the idea is simple: small government, anti-collectivism, or keep your collective as small as possible. Libertarians typically can be collectivists. There are anarcho communist, not anarcho communist. That doesn't make sense. Anarchists who believes in like really like no government, but you could live in a small village, in a small group, and you could be a collectivist in that village, be a collectivist in that group. But objectivism typically rejects that. They object anarchy. They think anarchy is evil because you need to have a organizing body. You need to have something there where people can exercise their rights. And in an anarchy, there is not always a guarantee that you're going to be able to exercise your rights without other people, being involved. That's a debate for another time. But libertarianism and objectivism have a lot of overlap, but it's not one-to-one. But the idea that you cannot be a libertarian superhero is ridiculous. You absolutely can. There's nothing preventing you from being a libertarian superhero. You can stop people who are punching others in the face. You can stop the aliens who are invading the country or invading the world. You can stop the bank robbers and the people, the crazy arsonists and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing preventing you from doing any of that. Just because Steve Ditko didn't know how to write an objectivist hero doesn't mean that they cannot exist. All right, that's it. My video was slightly longer than theirs. Good morning to Virgo Rebel Penguin. Thank you to Top Dog, Eric Mack, and JS, and everybody else who is up listening to this. I had to get this off my chest immediately so I can go to sleep. I tried to go to sleep at like 10 o'clock. It didn't work. All right. SurpriseStream over.